Hey everyone, so last week I talked about how I expect Zoro to get Conqueror's Haki in Wano. And so this week I wanted to follow up by talking about the type of Haki that I expect Sanji to improve in. And not just improve in, but a type of observation Haki that he seems set to master that will be unique to him out of the entire monster trio. So to start with, I'll address this. I know that a lot of people feel that if Sanji is going to be improving in any type of Haki soon, it should be armament. Because out of the monster trio, he is so far the only one who has yet to display the black coating. Now, I know some people think that there is no difference between black coating armament and normal armament, but I think there is solid evidence to suggest that yes, there is a difference, and at the very least, it's surprising that we have yet to see Sanji display any black coating in any fight so far. Because even in this panel with X-Drake, where it looks like it could be black coating, even in this case, would Oda really show it to us for the first time in such a vague, visually ambiguous manner, when he made such a big display of Luffy and Zoro's first uses of it? And to be clear here, I'm not saying Sanji doesn't have armament. Of course he does. This was clearly established back in Punk Hazard, where they were discussing who could take down Logias, with Luffy naturally listing the armament Haki users, as in this context, that would be the only type of Haki that could beat Logias. So Sanji obviously officially has armament, he just has not shown black coating armament just yet, and I think we have seen a few instances post-time skip where he does seem to have had a bit of difficulty in tests of raw force. And yes, Sanji is more so a speedy character, that's his main strength, and that still shows post-time skip for sure. But pre-time skip he was also very capable of extremely powerful, raw power kick attacks as well. And really that got taken up even further once he got Diabo Jambe. So I think aside from Hell's Memories, that has kind of been missing a bit post-time skip, that sort of like raw strength side of him as well. So all that is to say that yes, I do expect him to take a step forward at some point this arc in terms of armament Haki. However, that's not really a particularly interesting development to me, as it's just kind of improving on a skill that tons and tons of characters are already really, really good at. Now, on the other hand, regardless of how good Sanji is at armament right now, we know that his area of specialty, as confirmed by Oda, is observation Haki. And we've definitely seen glimpses of that so far. And what I think is also really interesting is the fact that he just picked up this invisibility ability. Now, Sanji's specialty of observation Haki and his new unique ability of invisibility seem contradictory at first, as the very existence of observation Haki suggests that the power of invisibility would be pretty much useless in the One Piece world. Because after all, what is observation Haki? At its most basic level, the two abilities observation is known for are, first of all, sensing the presences of others, and secondly, being able to read moves. Now, of course, I talked about in my broader Haki video, there are more advanced abilities of observation that seem to be, hearing voices of others over long distances, and literally seeing the future. But at the basic level, it is just, sensing other people and reading their moves. This isn't even a super uncommon ability. Like, maybe observation's a little less common than armament, or at least it's been commented on less frequently than armament, but we can infer that lots of people in the New World have at least basic observation Haki. So how does Oda reconcile this with the fact that he has made two very prominent fighters in the series specialize in invisibility? Now, this is a very important note, that both Sanji and Shiryu have recently picked up invisibility abilities. It's not just one character, and I'll address why that is important later in the video, but the fact that there's two of them is important. But the fact is that as it is, both these characters should have, on paper, completely useless abilities. Yes, invisibility, it seemed briefly useful against Page 1, but it's entirely possible that Page 1 is simply not particularly skilled at observation, as he does seem to be more so a brute force type character. And then there's also just the fact that observation, it's not a get out of jail free card for all surprise attacks. That only really works if you're like Katakuri, who is level-headed all the time. But the fact is that yes, people can be taken off guard even if they have observation. And we saw this even all the way back when observation was first being introduced, with the weaker priests getting shaken up and messing up their mantra, a few times. So this Page 1 scene where he's being taken by surprise by invisible attacks in no way suggests that invisibility cannot be countered by observation Haki. If anything, it just means that Page 1 is either not particularly skilled at it or was not focused enough to be using it at that time. However, by literally every other depiction of how observation works, any competent user should be able to get past invisibility once they're focusing. I mean, to start with, look at Fujitora. he is literally blind, but the point of observation haki is that he can basically see everyone anyway by sensing their spirits. That right there pretty much flat out disqualifies invisibility from being a viable ability against good haki users. To Fujitora, everyone may as well be invisible and it makes no difference. But if you want to somehow dismiss Fujitora as, okay, let's say he's a freak case who's just unnaturally good at observation, we have instances of much weaker characters being able to dodge attacks even with their eyes literally closed, thanks to observation haki. That's because sight doesn't matter. You're reading the intent of the opponent's attack. Luffy was even closing his eyes while fighting Katakuri, and it didn't matter. Even Usopp could literally see characters through walls just through their presence. You don't need to be literally able to see people when you're using observation haki. Now, people might point to the incident with Apu, where Luffy was getting hit with invisible attacks that he didn't avoid with observation. However, first of all, we don't know if Luffy was calm enough to be using observation. But let's say if he was. This is a sound wave. It's literally an undodgeable attack. With observation, you can read what the opponent's next attack is and dodge it, but since Apu's attack is a sound wave, it's not something that can be physically dodged in the first place. So even if Luffy could read an attack coming, he can't do anything about it. As such, sound waves seem to just be an exception. That doesn't change the fact that invisibility for Sanji and Shiryu should be useless against observation, as it's been clearly established that with physical attacks, like a kick or a punch or a slash or whatever, observation users can dodge them without seeing them. So all that is to say, invisibility, at face value, seems like a useless ability in One Piece. Now, you could argue that maybe, the raid suit is more than just invisibility. Maybe it's some sort of super special advanced Germa science that's so great that it makes the user just undetectable even to haki users. I don't know, that doesn't really make much sense to me in the first place, how science would somehow work against haki in any fashion, but that's why earlier I said it was important to note that there are now two characters who have invisibility. Right, so that tells me that the observation haki versus invisibility problem is not just something that Oda is just going to wave away with some raid suit specific excuse, because this issue is going to come up multiple times in the story. The fact is, Oda is not hesitating to give prominent characters this ability, despite observation haki being a thing. Like, Shiryu is a character that many believe to be one of Zoro's endgame opponents, if not the endgame opponent, so I highly doubt Oda would be just casually handing out invisibility to Sanji and to one of Zoro's major opponents without this problem of observation haki in mind. And so my conclusion, I think the simplest conclusion, is that this was never really meant to be a problem. Rather, there is a very dangerous combination of abilities that Oda is setting up. We already know that there are different abilities under the umbrella of observation haki, right? You can sense the presence of others in your area, you can read the attacks of your opponents. So then what if there is yet another branch of observation, which is being able to do the opposite and actually being able to conceal your spirit from others? Essentially, others can't sense your presence and your attacks can't be read. Basically, the idea is this. We know that haki generally has different branches of abilities and that new branches are still being uncovered. We know that two very important fighters have picked up invisibility powers. We know that observation haki would make invisibility completely useless. We can assume that invisibility is not going to be a useless ability for Sanji and Shiryu, but is likely going to be important for their fighting style in the future. So then, isn't there a good chance, considering all of that, that there is going to be another branch of observation that will allow these characters to counter the observation haki of their opponents? And now you might be saying, well, okay, maybe, but that feels like a bit of a leap. Why is that the only option? Well, I'm not saying that's the only option to making invisibility viable. I'm saying it's viable based on what we already know, and that Oda may have actually already dropped a pretty big hint that this is going to be the case. When the Straw Hats first arrive in Zou, Luffy is separated from the crew and ends up in the Forest of Guardians. This is back when the Minks were still hostile to the Straw Hats, and Luffy ends up fighting a bit with one of them. However, when it's determined that the Straw Hats are friendly, suddenly it's revealed that there were many more Minks surrounding Luffy at the time. It's just that Luffy somehow couldn't sense them. And here Oda makes a point of showing that Luffy is surprised and confused that they were surrounded. To be clear, Luffy is completely capable of sensing the presences of other characters, and throughout the entire post-time skip, he actually hasn't been snuck up on before. Basically, somehow, several of the elite Minks avoided being detected at all by Luffy's observation haki. That's interesting. Now, yes, I agree, it's possible this could just be a Mink-specific skill, similar to Electro. As far as we know, stuff like Electro or Diablo Jambe or Brooks Freezing, they have nothing to do with Haki. If anything, my guess would be that Electro has something to do with static electricity being weaponized, as it fits the fact that, the Minks are all furry creatures. Similarly, maybe being really good at hiding and being hard to detect is another animal type ability that's not really anything Haki related. However, as I talked about in my main video on Haki, the fact is that we've seen over and over throughout the series that Oda loves dropping moments of advanced Haki techniques earlier in the series without quite explaining to us what just happened, more so just leaving us a bit surprised and confused about what trick exactly was used, and then later on in the series we get an explanation that puts moments from before that we didn't fully understand into a different light. I personally really love the way he does this, where he teases more advanced abilities through hints rather than explicitly pointing it out, as it makes it more satisfying down the line when we get an explanation of a new ability, and then we can immediately start backtracking and realizing that this isn't coming out of nowhere. This is actually something we've seen before and simply couldn't understand at the time because we weren't ready to understand. I do feel like this moment with the Minks is potentially another one of these type of moments, where something somewhat odd happens that characters don't fully understand at the moment, but it's, minor enough that it's easily forgotten, or you could explain it away with something else and kind of wave it away, and then later on it turns out to have been advanced Haki being teased early on. Now, obviously the Mink scene by itself, when it happened, I wasn't like, oh my god, this must be advanced observation Haki. But now, taking into account the new developments that two prominent fighters have invisibility, that observation Haki inherently cancels out invisibility, that there needs to be some sort of way to make invisibility viable that would work for both Sanji and Shiryu. To me, the Minks scene fits in nicely as basically the answer, or the hint to the answer, like another branch of observation being hinted at earlier on, which is to conceal one from the observation of others. In that case, the pretty formidable ability that Sanji and Shiryu could have down the line is basically, true invisibility, unable to be seen or be sensed by Haki. Now, I really like this idea for a few reasons. First of all, obviously I'd much rather there be a good explanation for why characters with invisibility aren't just, immediately caught by observation Haki users. Like, there should be a good reason, and it should make sense for Sanji and Shiryu. So to me, the answer being a new branch of Haki, the power system everyone is pretty much working with, that seems the most fitting. Second, I would like, if this is how it happens, then I would have liked the way that Oda introduced it, where it's not just like, here are characters with invisibility, oh wait, observation ruins invisibility, okay, here's a new type of observation that counters that. No, it'd be more like, okay, here's a strange incident early on where Luffy's observation didn't work on the Minks. Now here, Sanji and Shiryu are progressing by getting invisibility abilities. Oh, is observation Haki going to be a problem? No, it's not, because as hinted at earlier, there are actually ways to get around it if you train that skill. Now lastly, the big reason I hope this is the case is because it would be a skill that is unique to Sanji. That's what I like about the way that Haki is developing, that different characters can have different skill sets. So, you look at the monster trio, and we're told that they have different specialties, right? So like Luffy conquers, Zoro armament, Sanji observation. And I like the idea that rather than force Sanji to catch up to the other two in armament like something he needs to, I'd still like to see him grow in that regard as well, but more than that, I'd rather him develop more of what is unique to him. And even in the branch of observation, I never really liked the idea that, now Sanji has to develop future sight, or else, like, to catch up to Luffy, or else now he's not even advanced in his own area of specialty. Because, think about it, the longest fight in the series was devoted to Luffy growing and developing future sight. I don't think I need to see Sanji rehash that same experience to pick up that same ability just to catch up to Luffy in observation, and it would probably be a more rushed development as well. As it is right now, I actually like the idea of Luffy being the only one in the crew who has future sight, because it does seem to fit something beyond just a cool ability, as this ability to change the future seems to be very important symbolically to his role in the One Piece world in general. So I don't think Sanji needs future sight. Maybe I'm reading too much into this jelly bean incident, but it seems to me that his standard observation Haki abilities are already really good. They're not future sight good, but good enough that he could probably hold his own in terms of observation with plenty of other characters. I think what would be a lot better is if he developed a branch of advanced observation haki that Luffy doesn't have, that would be unique to Sanji among the crew. And I'll address this real quick in case people get mad. Just because I'm saying that multiple minks might have this ability doesn't devalue how advanced it is. Like, Marigold has advanced armament haki. Charlie has the best future sight in the entire series. Like, weak characters can have extremely advanced abilities. That doesn't change the fact that they are advanced abilities. And the minks can't even make full use of it because it's not like they can turn invisible, right? So that aside, really, just as I like the idea of Luffy being the one who can change the future, and so future sight fitting who he is in a way, I really like the idea of Sanji being able to completely conceal himself. As if you go back to watch my recent Sanji video, that's where Sanji frequently shines best. When he goes rogue, when he's flying under the radar, and comes out of nowhere to save the day in a major way. I think so many of Sanji's best moments throughout the series come from that. And as I said in that video, if Luffy and Zoro are the two more overt, battle-heavy frontline guys, Sanji often works best as a sort of hidden ace of the crew. As such, Sanji getting advanced haki as well, specifically in his area of expertise, observation, and specifically a branch of observation that is unique to him and his character and allows him to play that role of hidden ace even better, would be very fitting in my opinion. So if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like, share, and subscribe. You can support me on Patreon to help me keep making these videos and to get my extended thoughts podcast on this subject and future subjects as well. Talk to y'all later.